Good afternoon. How are you all doing? You doing well? I feel so sad that this incredible weekend, the couple of days, is now almost coming to a close because I could keep having these conversations and extended discussions in greater and greater depth. And I have so enjoyed being here. And I just want to thank Afa and Aaron for their vision in creating this community and these wonderful conversations and all the people that I've had a chance to speak with here. It's really a tremendous gift to our world that Sphinx connects so many people, and I look forward to continuing to be involved. So thank you all for having me and for getting to know each other a little bit better through this conference. I'd like to introduce my wonderful colleagues, a colleague who has become a friend and a collaborator, Jessie Montgomery. And I can actually sit, I don't have to stand, too much caffeine. And DeLashea Strawder, who is an entrepreneur and theater director, music director of an extraordinary organization based around arts education here in Detroit. I will ask both of them to introduce themselves to you in their own words. But first, I'd just like to address the topic at hand. So the challenge for this discussion is the statement that was offered, as you all saw in the program. Artists and agents would like to see change in repertoire presented on stage. Yet often, laudable beginnings are met with a cautionary response by presenters, quote, protecting their audiences who want to honor tradition. Who should lead the way to change and how? Well, that's a very freighted and interesting question. And I've been on the presenting side for many years. I run an organization in Washington, D.C. called Washington Performing Arts, which has been around for 52 years and was started by a visionary man named Patrick Hayes. And the first chairman of the board was Todd Duncan, who originated the role of Porgy in Porgy and Bess. And the notion of how communities are reflected through organizations and how artists stake in an organization through their work, through their leadership, has been really fundamental in the design of Washington Performing Arts. It's an interesting topic for me. I guess I think about, I wonder, which traditions we're trying to protect, who gets to own those traditions, and how organizations and individuals lead versus follow. And the role of an artist is really to forge new ground, and artists need partners. Whether we're successful in changing the minds of people who think in a very ossified fashion, or if actually we should look around at who is standing with us, and when we take steps forward, see who comes along with us, and to build those strong alliances and collaborations that lead the way instead of dragging those who have yet to be convinced, actually role modeling the collaborations and the creativity that we want to see on stages. And I think when we ask the question, who should lead the way to change and how, I think the answer is actually in this room and at this conference and on this stage. So with that introduction, I would love for each of you to talk about your work from your point of passion, and then I'll offer a prompt question to get the conversation going.
Great, thank you, Jenny. My name is Jessie Montgomery, and I'm a composer and a violinist. I play in the Catalyst Quartet. And I've been composing now professionally for maybe about 10 years or so, and have been affiliated with Sphinx for more than a decade, almost 2 decades, I'd say at this point, and have it's just been an incredible thing to watch this conference evolve, and also to be able to invite this kind of conversation to such an incredible group of people, and it's an honor to be here. So, DeLashea.
Peace and blessings. I'm DeLashea Strawder. I'm the artistic director at Mosaic Youth Theater of Detroit. I'm also a teaching artist. I'm a songwriter and an artist in general. I'm very excited about having the opportunity to initiate and continue this conversation. One of the things that has been kind of ingrained in the fabric of Mosaic Youth Theater, for which I am an alum, is that from the very beginning, we started with pushing the envelope. We took an opportunity to bring young people from across the city of Detroit into historic theaters and do work that was not customary for young people to do. And so as we have continued to offer platforms for the young people to share their voice and share their ideas, we continue the conversation with people across our community about what art is, what is possible, and the power of young people's voice as well as the power of our individual voices.
So I'll ask both of you, before the prompt question, the pre-prompt question, what was it about this topic that resonated for you or resonates with you?
Well, you know, it's this question of making art that has a purpose and a vision for social change, for possibly changing someone's mind about something. That's, you know, we're not in our classical music training. It's not necessarily something that comes up. In fact, it doesn't come up at all. As you're sort of growing into your voice and learning your craft, and really it's become much more prominent in my work recently. I've been asked to answer certain questions that other people have, and sort of then in turn ask those questions of myself, and retell my own history. And learning more about my own personal history through those questions has been a really important step in my career and in my sort of vision for what it is that I'm, what's valuable in terms of what story I'm trying to tell with my art. And so I thought this is just, and I think this is something that's on a lot of people's minds. Just what is the purpose of art? Like, what's the goal? Is there a goal? Should there be a goal? And when there is, how do we do it in a way that's thoughtful, excellent, that's not, that you're not sort of even necessarily, that you're being fair, kind of in your presentation of it, and thoughtful and caring.
Well, and just to pause on that for a moment, there's social change in terms of the work that you're creating, so something inherent to the music or to the theatrical work, versus the way in which you develop and reach audiences or communicate with audiences. I mean, are you finding that there are different sort of tributaries in that social change? And how much is also expected of artists who haven't started out with that vision, whether they begin to create an overlay that feels authentic,
right,
or are pressured, because this is something that the world is wanting them to address?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. There's. Yeah. I mean, you do eventually. I think with any art, it's a story. You're telling a story. It doesn't. At any point, even if you're writing like modernist, where you're writing like a serialist orchestral sketch or something like that. That's, at the point at which you begin writing that piece, you're writing it from your own historical point of view. Why are you choosing that topic? Why are you, it's your story is happening at any point. It doesn't have to necessarily be, something a broad social, have broad social meaning at that point at which you're making it. It's going to take on that context based on who you are when you're creating it. So I think that's important for artists to know too. It doesn't have to be explicit at the point at which you're creating, right, although it does. I think those two things sort of can exist separately, but you do have to be aware of what it is that you're trying to do when you're doing it, right, whatever the context.
Yeah, there's something innate about the arts and uniquely beautiful that allows the possibility for conversation where there wasn't once an opportunity for it, regardless as to whether or not the specific point was to change someone's mind. When the art is excellent, when the art is authentic, then it creates connections between people. And I think that affords a lot of opportunity to move the needle forward in a lot of different aspects of life. It connects you more to your humanness. And when we're doing the work and being fully present in that work, then it gives us opportunities that wouldn't otherwise exist. And I think that's the part that speaks to us most.
Yeah. I mean, both of you are working in such powerful ways creatively and with the people around you. And I'm always keen in a field where at times we talk about the things that don't work. I find myself increasingly drawn to the stories, which are in abundance, of successes, collaborations that propel creative ideas forward, that engage audiences and artists' imaginations. And I would love for you to try to capture some of those experiences in as much detail as you can for people, because I think the role models and examples are a powerful way of learning, and they also give us strength as we advocate for ourselves. So are there examples? I know you have an example you'd like to share that we have in common.
Sure, yes.
So please.
Yeah, I'll start with this project that I'm working on with in collaboration with WPA. We are speaking of work that has a major mission point of view, but didn't get its due because of I'm working on a new adaptation of Treemonisha by Scott Joplin. I'm working with a colleague of mine, Janina Norpoth, to create a new adaptation, a new version of the opera. It's been reworked with a new libretto and new arrangements of the Joplin. This is a piece that he couldn't get off the ground because he was a black man living in the South. It was written in 1911, and he was refused production. No one would collaborate with him and help him put it on the stage. And so it's a story about a black woman leader. And at the time, 1911, to have that story being told, I think it just wasn't time. People weren't ready. And so we're luckily at a time now where we can give this piece some energy and put it on the stage and in a new way, and sort of give it some life. The libretto has been sort of strengthened in terms of storyline to give Treemonisha actually even more of a leadership role in the opera, and so I would like to just share a little bit about a little clip about the project, so you can get a better sense. Oops. I think this is going to work, yeah?
Here we go.
This guy here is a searching for her mama, so we'll bring. I now take the task to make sure she come back.
and men. Wives must obey and hear, because it is right. Remember all I say to you, because it's good advice. Swing that lady, swing that lady, swing her gently. Swing that gentleman, swing that gentleman. Swing, swing, going around, keep on going around, keep on going around. Girls are smiling, girls are smiling, smiling sweetly. Keep on going around. Boys are smiling, boys are smiling. Swing, swing, going around, keep on going around.
Is that awesome?
I think we can,
Having gone to a couple of the workshops, including one in Toronto last week, I can tell you that this music never leaves your heart and mind, and what the musicians have done, and Jessie and Janina Waney, Leah Simone, it's extraordinary. And, you know, what next? Because this isn't a work, it originated with a theater company that brought you in. It's not something that's going to instantly be produced by a standard issue opera company. It's chamber music, it's choreography, it's contemporary. It tells an American story, both behind the scenes and this very strong female character bridging two communities. So this whole notion of how presenters jump into this and what a project can inspire, I think this is the opportunity that we have ahead, and it's artist and piece driven. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So really, in the whole production of this work, it was important that the artistic creative team reflect the story. So all of the creative team are all Black women, mostly two Americans, two Canadians. I think that there's, when we go to presenters and talk about this work, the thing that I think what's important, what they're recognizing and where people's minds are now, I think they're ready to sort of take it on. They're ready to take on this idea, this idea of putting out this story, the Black American story and the female leadership story that's been going on the whole time, and now people are ready to hear it and they're excited about it. It feels new, and so I think this is an important moment to sort of seize, and I think that because we've had so much discourse in our politics and socially. I feel like a new window has opened up, and I feel like these conversations that we're trying to have about race, diversity, what's important, what stories are we trying to tell, I just really feel like people are ready to listen, thankfully. I feel like, we can sit and we can talk, and people are like, I think more presenters seem to be open to the idea, and they mostly get excited about this piece. And I think it's tremendously exciting, also because Scott Joplin, of course, is a composer who is beloved, but strangely many people don't know about this piece.
Yeah.
So, it's just a platform to help his voice get the due that he deserves, and then also to highlight this new story that I think we're all really excited about.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the sort of the components of the work, the narrative, the way it's constructed from the vantage point of the creative team, and also it's an international team, that offers as many touch points for discussion that in a sense it's not about diversity, equity as a discussion point. It's actually about the entire integrity of the work and the American story that is told about complicated issues and issues of visibility and support and agency that are being addressed through a work of art. I mean, how much American history have we learned through works of art that have either ignored or hit at topics full force, sometimes making it more palpable through storytelling than if it had been a topical or theoretical conversation. So
Absolutely.
this work is an important
And
platform for
opera
that.
and the medium, you know, is it's a great platform, you know, and learning about things that are going on in Mosaic. I mean, we're treating it like a theater piece. It's an opera, but it's really being approached from this theater perspective, which is, of course, theater is about dialogue. It's about communication, verbal communication. With opera, we get to do it in song, but it's still verbal communication. So I think, it's just been, it just offers a really important, it's an important format to have these discussions.
So, and a perfect segue to you and some of the conversations we were having earlier about new works that you commission, that the students in your program perform in, you tour. It's a very intensive and impressive footprint. Can you say a little bit about some of one or two
Absolutely.
Projects that were really juicy?
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to tell uniquely Detroit stories and uniquely youth stories. One of the plays that's most popular that is in our canon of work is a story called, or a play called Now That I Can Dance Motown 1962, which is the story of the Marvelettes, who were Detroit area young people who actually had the very first Motown #1, Please Mr. Postman. We've also done works that speak to the journey of, or the separation and the opportunity for community that exists in Detroit between the city and the city proper and the suburbs. There's a play that we do called Crossing 8 Mile, which was actually written with our young artists, as well as several different playwrights, to be able to help us tell that story. So that opportunity to have discussion about historical points of view, as well as our general history, in a way that is palatable for people, but also affords an opportunity to have discussion about what was happening then and what's happening now, who has the opportunity to share their story, as well as who is afforded the stage to be able to communicate what is happening in their community is really important to us.
Yeah. And how do you see do the students in the program have a role in creating the work or having their voice come through?
So in our early history, all of the productions that we did were written in concert with our young artists. As the organization has continued to grow, there are years where we do stories that are from oral histories of our young people. There's a production that we're doing this spring called Detroit to Dakar, which is based completely on stories of our young people's journey to Dakar, Senegal in 2003, and that experience as they went through a cultural and artistic exchange with another group of young people, the JFK Choir in Dakar, Senegal. And so their stories and their journeys are weaved throughout, but they also assist us in staging the shows. They assist us in writing music for our shows, as well as writing music for various recording projects that we have, and different opportunities throughout the course of their journey in the program.
Now, one of your partners, or your hosts and partners, is the Detroit Institute of Art, right? And then you were telling me a little bit about a tour that you do on the East Coast. So there are stories that are very specific and important in terms of storytelling about Detroit's history. How have you built partnerships around that, both locally, but then when you tour, how are those connections forged?
Well, one of one of the grounding principles of Mosaic is that Detroit young people will be ambassadors for the city. And so having opportunities for them to connect more with the city that they've grown up in, the city that they've come to love, and to be able to tell those stories from a perspective of young people growing up here in the city, as opposed to always hearing the narrative of people that have never been here at times, but have so much to say. I think it's important that we tell our own stories. And so having the opportunity for them to do that is extremely important, be it here in their communities, as well as across the country and internationally. In our 27 now year history, we've had the opportunity to tour to Africa, to Asia, to Europe, and to 25 states and provinces across the US and Canada. And the young people lead that charge. As we've been doing our touring performances, we've had the opportunity to do a partnership with the Public Theater in New York. Our young artists are doing a concert tour on the East Coast this summer. And to be able to share that journey, to be able to allow people to see what's going on here, and that all of the energy and the enthusiasm and the talent that that Detroit is synonymous with because of Motown, it's still here. And there are still amazing stories and still amazing people here doing amazing things. And so we're just excited to be able to have that opportunity to be able to share.
Yeah. So before I invite questions from the audience, I'd love if you could imagine back to the start of a project when you had the idea or were first anticipating it, and now on the other side of a project, such as with Treemonisha, where there are other presenters on board, because there's that early moment where it's lonely and quiet and your fingers are crossed and you're thinking about creating an excellent work, but then also having the audience for it and having the support. What are some of those early challenges that you overcome to keep you going? And then what are some of the rewards of staying the course and building those partnerships and experiences?
Well, doing something bold, taking a risk, always comes with its various levels of opposition, as well as varying levels of support. And so even starting Mosaic 27 years ago, there was a lot of conversation, a lot of opposition, or just a lot of change and challenge in that the work that we wanted to do with teenagers was, we wanted to do classical theater, we wanted to do classical music and contemporary pieces, pop, jazz, hip hop, all of these different things. And people wanting to put young people in a box, well, you have to do this or you have to do this. That's not really how, that's not how art works. You know, we can do all of those things. And so as we've continued to stay the course, there have been more people that support the work that we do and have a better understanding of that there is no need to put people in boxes. But there are still challenges when we look at doing new projects and having to work with people to bring them along. But the end product is always amazing. And again, brings us back to an opportunity to have conversation and breaks a cycle for other people who maybe have been stuck in a box and realizing that they have endless opportunity and endless potential to be able to walk in their own journey.
Yeah, and I think that's an important conversation here, is looking at role models, organizations that have done some piece of what you're striving to do, and asking them for the tools and kind of the DNA of how those projects were successful. And how about you, with Treemonisha as an example?
Yeah, Treemonisha is certainly an example. Yeah, there's, you know, I think when the project first came up, it was started by somebody in Canada, first of all, so it's not even being started by the inception of the project is not even by an American, so I think there's a little bit of insecurity around that, perhaps sometimes, but I think I'm just, it's kind of nice, though, to have this idea of somebody like looking in and sort of peering into our history. I think that was an important step, you know, and an important coming into the project, knowing, you know, like, okay, company has this idea, but like, where am I finding my voice in this? Why do I feel like it's important to tell this story? Why do I want to attach myself to this? And that was important. And connecting to the reason why you want to create something, what is the impetus? What is your connection to the work? Is going to be your jump-off point and your point of departure when you start to talk with presenters and other people that are trying to get on board with what you're doing. You have to realize your own connection to the story. For me, that was getting to know Scott Joplin's music, as you know, and his legacy, the story of Tremonisha, the story of post-slavery time, and learning about even more of that history for myself, and just connecting to the story. That's the discussion. That's the point where you say, this is an important thing for everyone to know. This is an important thing for everybody to know. I want you to take on and help support this idea. I think we're all going to get something from it. I feel passionate about it. Let's make this, let's do this together. Let's all participate in this important, in this journey together. I think with talking with presenters and, that's just really important to have your connection really strong. Know your connection to the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I invite questions. Oh, here we go. Our Slido host.
For Jessie, as a woman of color, how have you dealt with the social structure of classical music, white and male, as a composer and violinist?
Well, yeah, I get that question a lot, and it's interesting. First of all, not all Black stories are the same stories. We all have different stories. So my story is, you have, I grew up in New York City, so it's a super diverse community. The idea of that I was possibly ever facing any challenges due to my skin color or my femaleness, started only when people started asking me questions about it, to be honest. It's like, maybe, is there a problem here? I don't know. There's not a problem here, but I'm aware that there is, that this is an important discussion and that we're all participating in this discussion. It's been great. I mean, we've been having a good time. Things are going okay, but it's like, but when it comes to the obstacles that people of color face in classical music, I'm just, we have to just be here for each other and keep talking about it, and just be aware of the diligence that goes into a career in music, first of all, whether or not you're Black or white or whatever, and that thing carries you. That's what carries you through. That thing, that need to create, to perform, to tell. That's the thing that's we all have to just be around for each other for, because that's the hard stuff. That's the work, that we're all down here trying to do. So I don't know if that's, yeah.
Hello, I'm Luisa Maria Hernandez. I am a Boston-based opera singer and teacher and administrator and a little bit of everything. And my question is for all of you. Obviously, the field of opera has a very specific audience. And as you're looking at works such as these, how do you deal with making sure that your audience not only appreciates but understands the work that's being put forth? Because not everybody can afford to go to the opera. And so as much as we try to make it accessible, maybe people don't even understand that it's something that can even be in tandem with the experience that they've had throughout their lives.
There's an organization here, Opera Moto, and they take operatic performances into unconventional venues. And I think that similar to the journey of arts and how at some point the major works were only done in concert halls. The Detroit Symphony Orchestra takes music into libraries. They take music into community centers and things of that nature. And I think that bringing the work back to the people is extremely important, because once you experience it, it already creates an opportunity to have conversations. And when, you know, it goes back to authenticity. Anytime people are fully engaged in the work that they're doing, there's an opportunity for that connectedness to happen, and people will see themselves in the work and connect it to their own journeys. And I think that that is what makes it relevant.
Yeah, and also recognizing, I think, because I'm a composer, you know, in creating new work, I do think about sort of points of entry, also musically. You know, like there's different communities, you know, maybe listen to different variety of music, right? So I kind of like the idea of bringing in and fusing, you know, different styles of music together, so that, you know, it's not just, so that you're getting something that you wouldn't normally expect from opera. Maybe you're getting something that connects to a different part of your, you know, cultural experience. With Trumanisha, for example, I mean, you heard that didn't really sound like Joplin, that music, right? But it was actually all an arrangement of Joplin, but we're sort of infusing it with different cultural references across the board. West African influences, jazz, some popular and contemporary kind of stuff too. And the singers are also mixed voice types. So I think that, you know, thinking creatively about the content of what it is that you're presenting, and who it is that you're trying to reach is really an exciting and fun discovery and process.
Yeah. I also think, just reflecting back on my own education as a kid, I started composing when I was 9 or 10, and my parents didn't really know what to do with me, so we went to see everything and hear everything. And we spent most of our time not at Lincoln Center. I mean, I grew up in New York and on Long Island. We went to church basements, we went to restaurants, we went to art galleries, we went to all sorts of nooks and crannies, because there was no chance that we would go to the Metropolitan Opera. And we heard such excellent music in, you know, high school auditoria, and followed artists that we heard early on in that church basement throughout their careers as they grew and their careers evolved. And I think sometimes, and I say this is one of the foundational organizations in Washington, we work with a lot of partner organizations of varying sizes, a lot of local artists through our Mars Urban Arts Initiative, because our field sometimes valorizes everything that comes from elsewhere and doesn't really take care of the artistry within a geographic area. And I found that there's such a wealth. As a relative newcomer to Washington, having been there for just 6 years, I discover so many extraordinary artists that this initiative has years worth of artists that we could present and still not repeat. We have artists in residence who are local. We partner with big and small organizations, and it's that all boats rise. We all learn from each other, and our audiences discover that, you know, great spoken word organization, and they follow that young man that they saw perform at City Hall through his work in other stages. So that sense of collaboration and not being territorial is really important for us to do, because if a kid hears a musical theater work or an opera from a young age, then as they have means, they may support that organization as they're older, pivot to other organizations. The pipeline is important, and I think the quality of the work is always as good at every level. But again, people need to not overly valorize just shooting for that big sort of premier, highly visible experience, but have the habit of going to live music. We were talking about this before. We're not coming up against which orchestra is better, and audience members being able to discern the nuance between a local community-based orchestra and an international orchestra. We're trying to persuade people to go hear live music that's the point of the conversation. It's more existential than just discerning the quality between two. If you've never heard an orchestra and you don't know the repertoire, then there's an awful lot more work to do to impress upon people the need to go to hear work live. And that's what I think we're trying to do, is to forge those connections. So while they're discovering the extraordinary work, they get to know about the living artist, and they see that students have agency in the process, and then they appreciate live performance in all ways.
Thank you.
This is a really fun question. So, given unlimited resources, what issue would you love to discuss through your work? Anything you just can't wait to tackle?
So
That's a good one.
I would toss that back to the young artists that I work with. We actually ask them often what topics, what themes do they want to address. And right now for them, a lot of the things that they are very interested in is talking about youth leadership and what that means and how youth lead, and that it's not always from a mountaintop. They also want to talk about mental health broadly, and the challenges that are that they face with having conversations and being heard as it relates to, hey, I'm having a hard time with this. Oh no, you're fine. No, I'm having a hard time with this. And so just the challenges that they're coming up against as they connect to their own humanness and as they connect to the various layers of themselves. So.
Yeah, I mean, my real answer to that is dance music. I would love to use like dance music as a way of varying cultures, as a way to explore different cultures and their connections through movement, and the sort of human story of movement and dance and sort of community and communing. I find that really fascinating, and also potentially a way to just for myself to learn about and explore varying cultures. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Candace Shepherd. I'm from the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra's Orchids program. I was very excited to hear about your project to bring about Tremonisha in a new way. My exposure to it is through Carmen Balthrop's performance of it on Broadway many moons ago. And I mean, I know it exists. We have like kind of documentation on YouTube, but my statement and question is, so far the experience of studying classical music has largely been about the execution, preservation, and conservation of something that's only reflective of a certain portion of our history. Are there any plans with you all or anybody else to engage other institutions like the symphonies or even our education institutions further down about preserving these things, like, for instance, Carmen Balthrop's presentation of Tremonisha, and now yours going into the history of our curriculum and what we are teaching then to inform exploration, innovation, and creation?
Yeah, I mean, actually, what I'd like to, since you raised that and you're in the sort of the community with Washington Performing Arts Baltimore, when some of the artists involved with Tremonisha came last year to meet folks in DC and to look at how we could build out a sort of a coalition of supporters. We were very keen to get the word out early rather than just wait and have Tremonisha burst forth in a season brochure 2 years from now, because it's slated for fall of 2020. We had meetings with Howard University, the Library of Congress, the the Museum of African American History and Culture, CAPA, which supports classical artists of color, and a number of other, Congressional Black Caucus, because we wanted to be sure that Tremonisha's presentation in DC wasn't simply a show that came and went, but that many organizations had a stake in bringing their institutional context to the performance. And there was a big article in the Washington Post a few weeks ago about Tremonisha, the production, and Jessie and Janina's role and our role mentioned as well. One of the best things we can do is with an extraordinary work of art and a creative team is to allow and invite communities to find their own way of contextualizing the work so that they really own it and feel it, and people have a sense of participation. And we're actually going to be celebrating the centenary of Hazel Scott, the eminent pianist who you may remember held forth with her own TV show, the first woman of color to have her own TV show as a performer Cafe Society, and was also a civil rights leader. As we've begun to share some of our ideas around her, people have come back and said, oh, you know, my grandmother played harp in one of her ensembles, and all of these very personal stories come through. And rather than just simply top down say this is what we're doing and we're doing this, 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 and this, the interesting stuff is going to come from the bubble up and from the context that people bring. And we found this with the big Marian Anderson project a few years ago as well that we did at Constitution Hall, ironically. MC Hammer had something to say about Marian Anderson, and he shared that, as did Jessie Norman and the Winans brothers. So when we ask people to reflect on some of the most important figures of our time, or people who may have been temporarily forgotten, the story of her leadership and artistry come through. So that's what I think everyone should challenge presenters to do, actually, is to provide the context and to find that way that relates to their audience. The Treemonisha can be seen as a powerful work of art that is reimagined and looked at as just a more modern version of a museum piece, or it can be something that is deeply explored by all the communities you're going to bring it to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think also just, I think it's a really, you opened up a really important question and a vision, hopefully, for people, institutions to sort of take more responsibility for documenting these works. I think this is really important, and it's like this is a really important time. I feel people are ready. They're listening. So I think, yeah, like go to your conservatory library and say, hey, do you have Florence Price's string quartets on file or no? When are you getting them? We need them in our school. You know.
Yeah.
And you know. So let's. Yeah. This is good. Yeah.
Can this be the last question?
Yep.
Okay, so do you think it's valuable to try and guide audiences that are resistant to change, or are we at the point where we let them go and be okay with it?
I think that's a challenging question, because resistant doesn't mean unwilling. Sometimes there just hasn't been an opportunity for them to connect in a way that moves them to participate in a different way. And so I don't think that art making is always about convincing someone else of something. But as everyone goes on that journey, there's an opportunity for people, again, to find a little bit of themselves in the work. And if that helps people's minds to change or people's minds to open, then I think that is an amazing opportunity. But then also just being in that room, being in that space, having that experience with a host of other people, I think is also worth its own value. So I guess yes and no.
I agree with you. I think I can't speak for we, but I can speak for myself that I often struggle with, resistance as a composer growing up. Do you try to persuade people to love contemporary music, or do you stay the course, you find your allies, and make sure that people are in the room? We program a lot of contemporary music regularly, not just a contemporary music ensemble, but we commission for very established artists, as well as artists who are less well known. But people get used to the fact that there is work by living artists on our programs. And they may decide to discard it, to not, they like it, they don't like it, they might discover it. But we can't even hope to build those relationships if people aren't in the room, if we're not advocates. And I really, as a presenter and producer of work, look for opportunities to find the common points and to find the allies who are going to be our ambassadors. People don't like to feel stupid. They don't like to be excluded. What can we model as an organization? And which artists do we work with who take the deep breath and say, okay, that was a really uncomfortable thing to hear, but I'm going to keep trying to make the connection because the end goal is worth striving for. So I see that we have 3 seconds left. We have a wonderful plenary session following us, and I know that Sphinx wants to clear the stage, so we will all be outside after. But I want to thank you for great work, first and foremost, for being great leaders. And panelists, thank you. Thank you.